Imagine living with someone who smiles at the dinner table, says good night like everything is fine, and carries on like any other son or brother. But behind that calm face is something deeply wrong. A lie, so big, so dangerous, that when it begins to crumble, the consequences aren't just personal. They're catastrophic. We like to believe we know the people we live with. That family's a safe place. That no one wakes up one day and decides to destroy everything just to protect their pride. But sometimes, darkness grows slowly, quietly, right under the same roof. This story isn't about pressure or misfortune. It's about choices. Calculated, deliberate, irreversible choices. It's a case that shocked an entire country and left an online community horrified. A crime that turned a quiet home into a crime scene, and a screen name into a symbol of something chilling. Today's case is disturbing, brutal, and unforgettable. I'm Ethan, and today we're going deep into the true story of Munhaz Zaman, the Discord killer. The Zaman family story began in a small, quiet village tucked away in the rural heartlands of Bangladesh. Life there was simple but harsh. The family lived in a modest, crumbling home with leaky ceilings and dirt floors, surrounded by fields that stretched far but yielded little. Minhaz's father, a lean man hardened by years of labor, worked tirelessly from dawn to dusk, whether hauling sacks in the local market or picking up any odd job he could find. He carried a quiet determination in his eyes, a determination to give his family more than what the village could offer. Their days were marked by scarcity. Meals were often little more than rice and lentils, and luxuries like electricity or new clothes were rare. Minhaz's mother made do with what little they had, patching old clothes, fetching water from the distant well, and praying each night for a better future. Amid this struggle, Minhaz was a quiet, observant child, watching his parents sacrifice day after day, learning early what hardship looked like. But Minhaz's father wasn't content with survival. Every extra coin he earned was tucked away, every expense scrutinized. Over the years, his dream grew clearer: to leave the cycle of poverty behind, to start fresh somewhere with opportunity. After years of saving and navigating mountains of paperwork, the day finally arrived when the family's visas were approved. With heavy hearts and hopeful eyes, they left their homeland behind and boarded a plane to Canada, chasing the promise of a better life. They settled in Markham, Ontario, a bustling suburb with rows of modest homes and immigrant families chasing similar dreams. It wasn't easy. Minhaz's father took on long, grueling shifts at a local factory, often returning home with aching limbs and grease-stained clothes. His mother cleaned houses in nearby neighborhoods, scrubbing floors and washing windows for strangers who barely noticed her. Yet despite the exhaustion, they remained hopeful. Every paycheck went towards rent, groceries, and most importantly, savings. Their world was small: a rented apartment, thrift store furniture, budget meals, but it was steady. And then, after years of relentless work, Minhaz's father did something remarkable. He bought a house. It wasn't grand or large, but to the Zaman family, it was a castle, a place of their own, proof that hard work could indeed turn dreams into reality. When his father hung the key on a nail by the door, he smiled and said, "This is for you kids, for your future." A few years later, their grandmother joined them from Bangladesh, completing their household. She brought stories of the old country, her wrinkled hands tracing memories of a home they had left behind. Together under one roof, the Zaman family believed they had finally planted roots in this new land. Little did they know, the very foundation they worked so hard to build would one day crumble in the most unimaginable way. The Zaman family's house stood as a symbol of hope, a tangible reminder of how far they had come. But inside that house, all hopes seemed to rest on one boy's shoulders. From a young age, Minhaz carried the weight of his family's dreams, even if no one ever said it aloud. He wasn't loud or rebellious like other kids his age. Instead, he was quiet, soft-spoken, and always tucked away with his books. His parents proudly pointed out how he never got into trouble, never caused problems, never demanded attention. "He's a good boy," they'd say. "Minhas will make us proud." At every family gathering, whether in Canada or through calls with relatives back in Bangladesh, his parents shared the same refrain. "Minhas will be an engineer." The words rolled off their tongues as if it was already written in the stars. His father would nod solemnly, imagining the day his son would walk across a graduation stage, diploma in hand. His mother's eyes sparkled at the thought of neighbors calling her the engineer's mother. When Minhas announced his acceptance into York University's engineering program, it was as if all their sacrifices had finally paid off. His parents couldn't contain their joy. His father took the day off work to accompany him to campus, proudly walking beside him through the university grounds. They snapped photos in front of buildings, even though Minhas avoided going inside. His mother prepared a feast that night, cooking his favorite curries, setting the table with the good dishes usually reserved for guests. "Look at him," his father said that evening, raising a glass of mango juice. "Our son, the first in the family to go to university. The first engineer." Minhas smiled quietly, thanking them, but inside his chest, a deep pit of dread was already growing. Every moment of celebration felt like another stone added to the weight he carried. Because the truth was darker than anyone could imagine. Minhas had never been accepted. He had applied to York University, hoping desperately to meet the requirements. But he had failed. His grades weren't enough. The rejection letter had come months ago, tucked into the mailbox like any other piece of mail. But instead of telling his parents, Minhas hid it. He couldn't bring himself to shatter their dreams. After all they had endured, leaving their country, starting from nothing, scraping together tuition, they had poured everything into him. How could he tell them he wasn't enough? And so he lied. At first, it was small, a mention of classes here, a pretend complaint about a professor there. Then it grew into stories about exams, friends from campus, grades that never existed. Every day, he left the house with his backpack, pretending to go to university, only to wander aimlessly through malls, libraries, and coffee shops, killing time until it was safe to return home. Behind his quiet smile and gentle nods was a growing, gnawing secret. A secret that wrapped tighter around him with every passing day. The boy who was supposed to lift his family higher was now sinking under the weight of their hopes, caught in a lie that had no way out. And still, they looked at him with pride, never suspecting that the dream they held so close had already begun to unravel. While Minhas drifted deeper into his lie, another light was shining in the Zaman household. His younger sister, Melaha, was everything parents dreamed of in a child. Bright, ambitious, determined. From elementary school to high school, she collected awards the way others collected souvenirs. Her bedroom walls were lined with certificates, medals hanging from hooks, and framed photos of her standing beside smiling teachers at academic ceremonies. Every parent-teacher conference ended the same way. Glowing praise from educators, wide smiles from her parents, proud phone calls to relatives overseas. "She's a brilliant girl," the teachers would say. "She has a very bright future." But inside their home, cracks had begun to form. Melaha's brilliance came with a growing sense of independence, a fire that didn't always fit the mold of her parents' traditional expectations. She started staying out later than they liked, going to parties under the excuse of study groups. Her clothes became bolder, her opinions sharper. And one day, they discovered she had a boyfriend, something her father could barely bring himself to say aloud. The arguments began, quiet first, then louder. Her father's voice thundered through the house, pleading, scolding, warning. "You're forgetting who you are," he'd say. "You're throwing away everything we've worked for." But Melaha pushed back, standing her ground, refusing to be boxed in by the old rules. As Melaha's rebellion grew, her parents' disappointment deepened. The girl they once proudly paraded as their rising star now felt like a stranger. They didn't understand this version of her. the one who questioned them, who carved her own path. Slowly, their eyes turned away from Melaha and focused entirely on Minhas. "At least he's steady," his mother would whisper, half-heartedly, after another argument with Melaha. "At least he won't disappoint us." Minhas heard those words every time, felt their weight every day. His parents saw him as their last hope, the quiet son who never argued, who stayed home, who made no trouble. And because they believed so deeply in him, he couldn't bring himself to break their hearts. Their dreams weren't just about his future. They were about redemption for their sacrifices, proof that leaving everything behind was worth it. Minhas carried that hope like an invisible chain. And every day, he stayed silent. The chain grew heavier. The lie wasn't just about school anymore. It had become the very thing holding their family's hope together. And Minhas couldn't imagine what would happen if it ever broke. The lie stretched on, day after day, month after month, year after year. Minhas woke every morning, packed his bag, and left the house with the same routine. His mother would hand him a container of food. His father would nod proudly, and Melaha would barely glance up from her phone. To everyone, he was a university student on his way to class. But once he stepped outside, the illusion began to crumble. There were no classes, no professors waiting, no classmates saving him a seat. Instead, Minhas wandered, aimlessly drifting through malls, lingering in food courts pretending to study, sitting in libraries where he wasn't enrolled, sometimes just walking until his feet hurt. He found refuge in internet cafes, dimly lit rooms filled with the hum of computers and the soft click of keyboards. It was in one of these cafes that Minhas stumbled upon a multiplayer game, a digital battlefield where avatars fought, built alliances, and chased victories. For a few hours each day, he wasn't the failing son, the fake student, the disappointment waiting to be exposed. He was just a player, another username in a sea of strangers. Soon, the game led him deeper to its Discord server, a bustling online hub where players gathered outside the game to chat, strategize, joke, and share memes. The server quickly became more than just an extension of the game. It became Minhas' sanctuary. In that digital space, no one asked about grades or exams. No one looked at him with expectant eyes. Behind his screen name, he could be funny, sarcastic, even bold, traits that felt impossible in the real world. As weeks turned into months, Discord became his primary social world. He forged online friendships, bantered late into the night, laughed at memes only they understood. But mixed into the light-hearted chatter were darker moments. Sometimes, Minhas would let fragments of his inner turmoil slip through, a cryptic message here, a bleak joke there. His friends would brush it off, assuming it was just internet humor, the kind everyone used to sound edgy or detached. But inside, the despair was real, and it was growing. Each passing day deepened the gap between who his parents thought he was and who he had become. Every login into Discord felt like stepping further into a world where the expectations of reality couldn't follow him. And in that quiet distance, something inside him was unraveling. By the summer of 2019, Minhas was drowning in the lie he had built brick by brick. His family had begun planning for his graduation from York University, ordering clothes, discussing ceremony dates, preparing for photos they believed would mark the pinnacle of their sacrifice. Inside, Minhas was collapsing. The weight of expectation, of the lie that had stretched too far, was suffocating. He could see no exit. Every fake exam, every fabricated grade, every empty day pretending to attend class had led to this moment. He couldn't imagine confessing, not just because of the shame, but because of the look he feared seeing in his parents' eyes. They had worked too hard. They had given up too much. Telling them the truth felt like killing them anyway. So he turned to the only place where he could speak freely, Discord. A day before the tragedy, he sent vague, cryptic messages to his online friends. "Something big is coming tomorrow. I've been planning this for a while." Most thought he was joking. Maybe he was writing a horror story. Maybe it was some kind of dark roleplay. A few replied with laughing emojis. Some didn't reply at all. Then came July 27th. That morning, Minhas stayed home while his family went out. Around noon, his mother returned first, fresh from her midday prayers at the mosque. She walked through the front door, setting down her purse and taking off her shoes. As she stepped inside, Minhas approached from behind and struck her with a crowbar. She died instantly. His grandmother, resting quietly in her room, was next. Her frail body couldn't resist. Within minutes, she too was dead. Minhas cleaned the blood, wiped the floors, changed clothes. Then he sat back at his computer, opened Discord, and typed, "I've killed my mom and grandma." The server froze. For a moment, no one was sure what to say. Some thought it was an edgy joke. Others felt a sudden chill, but still clung to disbelief. It was impossible, they told themselves. But Minhas wasn't joking, and it wasn't over yet. The house had never been so quiet. Blood still stained the edges of the floor, and Minhas sat in front of his computer, bathed in the dim glow of the screen. Messages poured in. Shock, confusion, disbelief. But no one took real action yet. No one could process the idea that someone from their community had actually murdered his mother and grandmother. He waited. His father was due home by early evening, after finishing another long shift at the factory. Minhas knew his routine down to the minute. While the world outside moved on as usual, he sat in silence, checking Discord, reading every line, watching people try to guess whether he was bluffing. Then the door opened. His father stepped in, tired and unsuspecting, probably thinking about dinner or tomorrow's work schedule. He didn't even have time to remove his shoes. Minhas struck without warning, attacking with the same weapon he had used earlier. The impact was immediate. His father collapsed in the entryway, blood pooling quickly beneath him. Still, Minhas didn't cry. He didn't scream. He just dragged the body inside, cleaned up what he could, and waited again. His sister, Melaha, returned just after sunset. She had been working part-time at a local store and was excited. She had just landed an interview for a summer internship. Her footsteps were light, hopeful. She opened the door, calling out for their mother. Before she could set her bag down, Minhas attacked. She barely had time to scream. When it was over, he walked back to his computer, wiped his hands, and typed again in Discord, "Now I've killed my dad and sister too." This time, disbelief turned to terror. Panic exploded across the server. People began frantically searching for clues to his identity, scrolling through his old messages, trying to trace his location. Some even contacted police, hoping it wasn't too late. But for Minhas, the longest day had ended exactly as he planned. And now, all that remained was the aftermath. The night had fallen heavy over the Zaman household, but inside, time stood still. Minhas didn't flee. He didn't try to hide the evidence. Instead, he remained seated at his computer, scrolling through messages from stunned Discord users. The light from the screen flickered across his blank face. Hours passed. Some users, finally convinced that he was telling the truth, had contacted the authorities in Markham, Ontario. Multiple calls flooded in, urging police to check on the Zaman residents. The tip-off was bizarre, but serious enough to be acted upon. Around 2 a.m., officers arrived at the quiet suburban home. From the outside, everything seemed normal. Lights off, no noise, but no one answered the door. After repeated knocks and warnings went unanswered, police forced their way inside. What they found was horrifying. For bodies lay in different rooms. Blood-soaked carpets, stained walls, and the smell of death lingered in the air. And amid it all, Minhas sat silently in the living room, as if waiting for them. He didn't move. He didn't speak. He surrendered without resistance, hands raised as if the weight of what he had done had finally crushed him. Investigators quickly secured the scene. The crowbar, still bearing traces of blood, was recovered. The house was meticulously documented, photographs, DNA samples, blood spatter analysis. But one of the most chilling discoveries came from Minhas' own computer. Discord logs, stretching over hours, showed every detail, every confession, every time-stamped message of death. At the station, detectives sat down across from him, expecting chaos or denial. Instead, they were met with a calm, eerily composed young man. "I couldn't let them find out I lied," he told them, voice flat. They wouldn't survive the shame. There was no remorse in his words, only a kind of tragic finality. And with that, the illusion Minhas had built for years crumbled into a nightmare. The murder shattered not just a family, but an entire community, both online and offline. News of the crime spread quickly, first through Discord screenshots, then through headlines that seemed too horrific to be real. The Discord killer, the media dubbed him. Local residents in Markham were in disbelief. The Zaman family had always kept to themselves. Hard-working, polite, quiet. Neighbors remembered the father walking to work in the early mornings, the mother tending the garden, and Melaha laughing with friends in the driveway. Nothing had ever suggested what was coming. Thousands of miles away in Bangladesh, distant relatives mourned from afar. Calls poured in, faces wept on video chats, prayers were offered in mosques. They had once rejoiced when the Zamans moved to Canada, believing the family had escaped poverty for a better future. Now, that dream had turned to ash. Minhas's trial was short. He pleaded guilty to 4 counts of first-degree murder. The judge handed down a life sentence, with no chance of parole for 40 years. The courtroom was silent as the details of his deception and the brutality of his actions were read aloud. There were no pleas for leniency, no excuses. His sister's friends, still in disbelief, shared memories of her brilliance, her laughter, her dreams of becoming a doctor. At her school, students gathered in vigils. His father's co-workers, many of whom had known him for over a decade, organized donations to help cover the cost of returning the bodies to Bangladesh for burial. In the end, what began as a family's quest for a better life, a father's sacrifice, a mother's devotion, a grandmother's journey, and 2 children's futures, was destroyed by a single lie, compounded by fear, shame, and silence. Minhas Zaman's story became a haunting reminder. Sometimes, the greatest tragedies grow not from hatred or violence, but from the quiet, unbearable weight of expectation and deceit.